Hello everyone, good afternoon. I'm Kumaresh from Positka. I will be taking you through the session today on what observability is, what is the trending problems faced in various organizations right now, and what can be done about it. What are the solutions available right now? So without further ado, let me jump into it. So today's agenda, we'll first be looking at what a data pipeline is, what are the key challenges faced by security and IT teams, and what is Cribl, how exactly does it help identify these problems and resolve these problems. And after that, there will be a live demo session done by my colleague Miran, who will then also be taking up Q&A and like answering all of your questions. So feel free to post your questions on comments whenever you feel like asking question, and that is pretty much it. So first of all, before we go into it, let me set up some context here. Like, what exactly is the difference between monitoring and observability? Like, first of all, monitoring is you're defining certain matrices and you're monitoring them, you're assessing them so that when something goes down, when something bad happens, you're made aware of it. So that is what happens through monitoring. But that used to be enough back in the day. But recently, it is more important not just to know when something goes down, you need the required data to find out why it has gone down. So that is where observability comes in. Observability is tooling or solutioning that helps the teams actively debug what went wrong and find out the solutions. So unlike monitoring, which you are predefining and you set, you know what you are requiring, what data is required. But in terms of observability, since it is not predefined, you never know which data is going to be valuable until you actually need the data, right? When it is more of a holistic view of your entire environment where troubleshooting is enabled through the various data available. So in a nutshell, monitoring tells you that the system has failed, while the observability helps you find out why the system has failed. And the latter has become more critical right now. Like monitoring is a part of observability. Now, having set this context, let us see why observability matters. Like it is not only about application performance monitoring these days. Observability is very relevant in SRE and infra monitoring as well, in end user experience, in SecOps, DevOps, and DevSecOps. In all of these, it is necessary to have the data that is needed for troubleshooting and making sure everything's smooth and ultimately you're not running into troubles, right? So what does this mean? Like earlier, we were quite it was quite sufficient to just log events and like have the required logs along. But now, in terms of observability, these are called the three pillars of observability, where it's not just about logs and events, it's about matrices and it's about traces as well. Now, matrices can be aggregatable and is quite low in volume, but there is also tracing. And if you combine all three of these pillars, the requirement in terms of data volume is going to rapidly spike. So that is when we say rapidly spike, these are some of the data sources. Now, these are the various sources of solutions that generate data, which can then later be used to identify issues and like it can be value can be derived out of all of these data sources. Now we have collectors, for example, Azure Blob, we have Splunk Search, we have File, Google storage, Cloud Storage. We have push type of data sources, which include Grafana, Prometheus, etc. We have pull sources, which include Amazon SQS, Prometheus Scraper, O365, etc. We have TCP, UDP, we have APIs, we have agents. Now, there are various types of these data sources, each of which will generate a lot of data. And as I mentioned earlier, with observability, you never know which is going to be required until you actually need it. So it is important to have the data required, I mean, at the right place at the right time when you need it. Now, all of these data can then be diverted to different destinations. Now, the destinations can be for various different purposes. For example, it could be for cloud data management. It could be your security tool, your SIEM, can be cloud storage, can be tools for business analysis like Tableau, Power BI, and it can be infrastructure monitoring like Zabbix, Datadog. We have log management tools like Graylog, Sumo, and then there is application performance monitoring. Now, various organizations, and especially the larger ones, tend to have multiple such tools for each category because they need different tools to derive different types of value from each of the data that is getting sent to the tools. Now, having all of these different data sources that I talked about, having all of these different data destinations implies that it has become quite a mess of a architecture for most big organizations, right? So let's take a quick pause at this point of time and let us get into the first poll. Back to you, Vikash.
Yeah, the poll is live now.
So for security, which SIM do you use? The major ones we have listed out here are Splunk, QRadar, Securonix, Elastic, and if you happen to use anything else, you can just go with other. And half the time has passed and looks like Splunk is leading.
Yep.
By quite a bit. This is interesting.
Okay, so 90% of the people have voted for the Splunk.
Yes, that is quite interesting.
Let's end this particular poll.
Right.
We can move forward.
Okay, thank you for the responses, everyone. So looks like 94% of the people joined in Splunk. I am quite curious about what the remaining one other is, but all right. Okay, so moving on, let us now I have set up the context in terms of why observability is relevant and what that has done with the number of data sources and number of data destinations in IT environments. Now, what are the various problems or various implications of this increase in data sources and destinations? Now, the growing problem is that obviously the volume of data has exponentially increased, and it is expected for that to be 175 zettabytes of data creation in 2025. And there is also with higher data, there is also compliance requirements on having the right data when required and making sure that there is availability of data to handle the compliant requirements. Not following so with, of course, come with its own financial implications. And with the increase in data and with the various ways in which the data can be used, as we discussed earlier, there are a lot of different tools that are being employed in the industry right now. And that implies that there is more complexity involved as well. Like 54% of organizations tend to have 6 or more monitoring tools. So that is quite an interesting statistic. Now, what does this imply? There are various sources of data and there are various destinations. Each destinations tend to have their own agents, which are now put in each of the sources, wherein they collect the information from the sources and send it to the destination that is predefined. Now, for example, you have Datadog, it sends the data to Datadog destination, doesn't send data to wherever you want. So that has resulted in what we sometimes call in the industry as data spaghetti. There is quite a bit of complexity in sending data from various sources to destinations. And there are also certain complications that arise with this complexity. Now, for example, obviously the data volume itself is quite high, and that implies that the cost is also going to be high because you have license costs, you have people costs, you have storage, resource costs. So that is one aspect, that is one complexity. Then there is the other one being vendor migration is cumbersome. Now let's say you have a certain SIM and you want to evaluate, you want to move to a different SIM. It is going to be a lot of effort to first get your earlier SIM out of the way, no, take it, remove it from each of your sources, then install the dedicated agent for the new tool that you're considering on each of the sources once again. Now, this is very time consuming and people effort consuming. So that is what we mean when we say vendor migration is cumbersome. And there is also the fact about organizations tend to send data as it is to various sources, I mean, various destinations, even though the destination may not need all the data. Like So certain tools may need only specific data for value to be derived from it, and the other data being sent to these destinations may end up actually being useless. But it is hard to send specific relevant data to the tool of choice. So that is a problem that a lot of companies are facing as well. And in certain destinations, it has the expected format of data is fixed. Like uh, sources may generate data in a certain format, but different destinations may expect different format for the data to be usable. So that is again found to be a complexity where you send the same data in the same format to multiple destinations and things don't work the way you want it to work in certain destinations. Now, another point which is kind of similar to what we discussed earlier is that not all data needs to be stored in the tool of analysis. Like you can have tool of record and tool of analysis. These are two different things. And tool of record can be something like a cheap blob storage, can be a cheap storage destination where full data can reside long term. But data going to analytic tools should be like something that is actually providing value in the tool of analysis. Like you don't need all data to go into tool of analytics because that only implies more license cost, and you are going to face issues in terms of resources as well, where more data being processed equals more strain on resources. So these are the various complexities involved with having full data long term, in long term in tool of analytics. And lastly, data duplication has also got a significant impact on cost. So let's take all of these sources. Now, if the entire data is sent to all of these destinations, that is quite a lot of duplication. And with duplication, obviously comes license or like cost related implications as well. Now, let's take a pause here and see what ultimately is the bottom line. Like with all of these issues, organizations need to handle more data, and for that, obviously, they need budget. But what happens is that the data growth is exponential. It's like 27% compound on an annual basis, but the IT budgets tend to be a bit linear. So if you look at this, it looks like the IT budget is never going to match the data increase rate, right? So what then is the solution? Before we jump into it, let's have a quick break and go to the second poll.
The second poll is live now.
So we discussed a number of different complexities faced in IT environments these days. Now, what is the biggest pain point in your organization? Like, is the same data being sent to multiple systems? Do you want to, is there a need to perform complex transformations before the data reaches the destination? Do you want to be able to filter or reduce data before it reaches the destination so that the destination license cost is addressed? So what is it? Looks like there is quite a split of opinion here compared to the earlier question. It is valid. Interesting. So quite a lot of you answered, and looks like the ability to filter and reduce data while sending seems to be quite popular as a pain point, and which makes sense. It directly affects your resources utilization. It directly affects your license cost. That makes sense. Quite expected. All right. So moving on. Okay. So we looked at the various problems faced in the industry right now with the increase in data. Now, what if you had the flexibility and choice to do the migrations that you want to do, use the tools that you want to do, and scale the way you want to scale? And what if you could take control and reduce the risk? What if you can transform the data before it reaches destination so that you can standardize the data retention, you can sanitize the data in flight, and what if you could observe more while spending less? Now, this is pretty much the theme of this session today. Pay for what is needed, and like you can pretty much observe what needs to be observed, but you can spend less while doing so. And this implication is on licensing, hardware storage, and the people cost. Now, what if there is a single solution where which sits between sources and destinations and acts as the data pipeline so that everything is consolidated through the single solution and all the data flows through this pipeline to the destination of your choice. And that is called Cribl stream. Now, let me give a quick introduction of what exactly is Cribl. So Cribl as a company is like a technological innovator. They have defined observability pipeline market, and they are known for being vendor agnostic and their hypercloud approach. And the founders of Cribl are like they come from observability background with 30 years plus experience, and they are supported by major companies such as Sequoia. They have Redpoint backing them up. They have Greylog, etc. Now, what exactly does Cribl offer? Now, we said it sits in as a data pipeline between the sources and destinations. What is its value proposition? What are its use cases? So the first one is that we call it collect, right? It can collect from any data source. It doesn't matter what your data source is. It is vendor agnostic, and it allows for integration so that any of these sources can send the data to Cribl so that the relevant observability data can be sent to the destination of your choice. And then there is enrich. The data comes in its raw format, and often it may not have the required, it may not be complete in the sense that having a bit more information such as GeoIP, such as cloud metadata or custom table databases, having that extra bit of information may help the data provide more value at the destination. So it is possible to get the data into Cribl, apply the enrichment as an enrich the data before it reaches the destination. And this is probably the most popular value proposition of Cribl. It is reduce. You can control cost by reducing unnecessary fields and dropping unimportant events. So data as a whole comes into Cribl. You reduce what needs to be sent to the various destinations. You can choose the destination and you decide, okay, this is what I need in my destination, and that is all you send. So that way, when the data reaches the destination, it is going to control the cost in terms of the license as well as the resource utilization. Then there is transform. So you can convert the data once the data reaches into Cribl. There's a concept called pipeline, which is nothing but a set of functions that are applied to the data that has come in. And once these functions are applied, it is basically transforming the data so that when it reaches the destination, it is in a format that is expected or anticipated in the destination, making it usable. And one aspect of this transformation includes masking or encryption of data, which is quite popular in both the health industry and it's also popular in the financial industry, where you get all your data into Cribl, but then in the destination, you don't want your users to be able to access personal data. Now, what you can do is you can apply mask or apply encryption to the data so that the private information is not visible for end users, but they can still apply analytics on the data that has come in. So this is one key use case for financial institutions. Then there is the use case for routing. You get data you can get the same data to different destinations. So by having Cribl sitting here, you can break down data silos and increase visibility, and you can also you have increased flexibility and choice of tools. Basically, like you can send the relevant data to the tool of this your choice, so that you have the data you need at the time of need. And lastly, there is a relevant, it's a similar use case called replay, where data is getting transformed. You're applying reduction, you're routing it to different places, you're routing only the data you need to the different places. So this means that it is probably safer to have a full copy, the raw log, the full low. I mean, it may be low value in analytic tools right now, but it may be needed in the future. So in such cases, you can send the full data to a cheap blob storage or like storage such as S3, so that eventually when you need the data, you can easily route it back through Cribl Stream to the destination of your choice. So that is what we call replay. You're replaying these data from the low-cost storage into the destination of your choice when you need it. So these are the various value propositions of Cribl. Now moving on, let me just visualize a couple of the use cases that we discussed. So let's take routing. Now you have data coming in from a specific source and it enters Cribl. Now in Splunk, in Graylog, you don't need the entire data. You need only certain part of the data. So what you do in Cribl, you apply pipelines, which are a set of functions that I described earlier, and define where it needs to be sent. So you're sending data to Splunk. This is only the data that is needed in Splunk. It's not the entire data. Likewise, you're sending only the data needed to Graylog, and you're sending the full fidelity data to Databricks so that in case you need it in the future, you can replay it back. Now, what is reduction? So this is an example of field level reduction where there are various fields that are in logs and events. So what happens is you can define what fields are required for you, and you can define what fields are like not really necessary, don't really provide any value. You can choose to remove them before it passes through Cribble stream to your destination. So when it's coming in, you have all of this, but when it goes out, you can, I mean, the highlighted parts are basically removed, and only this goes to the destination. Now this is field level reduction, but Cribble also allows you to do event level reduction, where events as a whole can be chosen to be ignored when it gets, I mean, can be filtered out when you're sending to the destination. For example, certain types of events, you may need just 3 or 4 out of 10 to still derive value out of it. You may not need all 10 of it. So that is basically 40% data is what you actually end up needing. So Cribble allows you to define how you want to pick those 40% and it will filter out the remaining 60. So that is reduction. Now the next use case is what we discussed earlier, just replay. Let's say your fulfilled data is in Amazon S3 and 2, 3 years later, it turns out that you actually want the data from the past. You can still easily route it back through Cribble stream to Splunk. So this, in essence, means you have saved a lot of money in the couple of years when the data is resided in Amazon S3 rather than Splunk, because Splunk is not a long-term data storage tool, it is a tool of analysis. And there is also what we discussed in data obfuscation, which is like you can apply this to sensitive data. Let's take this example for credit card numbers. Now have a couple of different ways to protect the sensitive data. Now there is a way to mask it, can hash it and encrypt it. Masking means you're just hiding a certain part of the data, but it still retains the format. And in case of hash, it is getting irreversibly converted, but it is always going to be unique. So even though the private information is not visible to the users, they can still perform analytics on these numbers. I mean, on these values basically. And in case of encrypt, you can encrypt data so that it is not human readable, but you can make it so that people who need access to the data, who may need access to those private data, can decrypt it on, let's say, Splunk, for example, using special commands that Cribble has enabled for decryption. So Cribble allows you to perform all of these different types of data obfuscation on your data before it reaches your destination. So that is a huge use case for Cribble. Now, after we have discussed these use cases, let's check out some of the projects in which Cribble can be helpful. Now, there are projects for choice and flexibility. For example, there may be XDR initiatives where you want to evaluate multiple tools. Now, Cribble helps you evaluate these tools simultaneously, reducing the procurement time. And if you look at data strategy, there are it is many companies are considering differentiating between tool of analysis and tool of records. So Cribble helps you do that. It can help you store the logs long term in your data lake while sending only the required data to your tool of analysis. And of course, most companies are now considering cloud migration. Cribble is going to help quite a lot in terms of migration because you just get the data into Cribble once and it helps in optimizing the data ingestion and reducing the license storage costs. Now we have security and IT ops data sharing, wherein data required by security may be different from data required by IT ops. So you get the data into Cribble and you define what needs to go where. So we discussed the masking and data obfuscation earlier. That can be applied here so that only the relevant data is going to the relevant team so that they derive the maximum value out of it. Now there is compliance and data retention requirements, of course, which again Cribl can help you store data long term without having to worry about cost in the tool of analysis by always having the data in your um, tool of storage and making it available, which is very important, so that eventually when you need it, you can always get it back through Cribl to your destination of choice. And lastly, we have projects to observe more and spend less. For example, you can consolidate your infrastructure, you can consolidate multiple vendors and tools without losing valuable insight, without losing visibility on your environment. And there are companies with a lot of data ingestion backlog where like Cribl helps in terms of onboarding the data quickly and efficiently without losing visibility. And also it reduces the onboarding time from days to hours. So let us take another pause here and I will let my colleague Niran do a quick demo, show you the GUI of Cribl, how exactly does it look, how simple it is. One important thing that I wanted to point out is that Cribl is very GUI friendly. You don't need to do too many things back end. It's all very GUI friendly, and my colleague will be showing it to you right now. So over to you, Niran.
Thank you, Kumaresh. Let me share my screen. Give me a moment. Vikas, can you make me the co-host? It's done. Okay. I'm still not able to share my screen. Okay. Let me know if you guys can see the screen. It's visible. Right. All right. Thank you, Kumaresh, for giving the introduction about Cribl and highlighting some of the major challenges that's been faced by the organizations with data management. Right. So here, as you can see, this is the UI of Cribl. Right. Let me just this. So this is the landing page of Cribl, right? So where we can see who is logged in, right? So this is a Cribl Streams landing page where you can see the two high-level options to configure your data routing. One is the easiest option, which is primarily used for testing purposes. Cribl is offering two options. Basically, one is quick connect and the other one is routes, right? So we'll get into that later. So as you can see here, this is just drag and drop, right? So where you connect the source to a destination and Cribl acts as a middleman here. It has options to, like Kumaresh mentioned, it has options to transform the data. Again, it also has options to actually let the data pass through without making any changes also. Just act as an intermediate layer. So the high level concept includes sources and destinations, which is already covered as part of the webinar. I'll just quickly show you how many inbuilt data sources that Cribl supports, right? So you can see various types of sources here, starting from collectors and push-based sources like syslog or Splunkers here, no Splunk TCP and Splunk HEC. And you can also collect data from data sources that has pull mechanisms like Amazon Kinesis or SQS or S3 also, right? And there is again Cribl's internal data sources, which is mostly used for monitoring its own performance as well as troubleshoot any issues with data forwarding. So if I just take you back to the destinations, Cribl out of the box supports almost major destinations available in the market, right? So some of the leading products are Splunk, and you can see Azure Sentinel is one, and you can see different products like Elastic, or you can also look at Min.io is one. So New Relic is another destination that Cribl supports out of the box. So right now, Prometheus and Grafana are also majorly used by organizations. These are some of the out-of-the-box destinations that can be used from Cribl to send data to. right? So how does it do it? So like I mentioned, it provides you two different options. We'll look at the easiest option first. Okay. Easiest option is the quick connect option, which I like I told you is primarily used for testing, where you can just drag and drop sources and destination connections. Just like if I want to add another destination, so I can just quickly drag it from here and send it to S3. Of course, these sources and destinations have to be configured before making this drag and drop, right? So you'll have to configure what your S3 bucket is and where and your API keys to access that S3 bucket and the AWS account, etc. In case of Splunk or any other solutions, you'll have to give the actual IP address and the port number along with the user credentials for authentication, right? As you can see, you can map multiple sources and multiple destinations. So here, if you see Splunk's TCP is mapped to Splunk load balancer, as well as single instance standalone deployment also, but with different functions built into it, right? So if I look at the functions here, it is only it is using a pipeline to actually navigate the data. So we'll get to pipeline in some time. So just to let you know, so this is how Cribl's Quick Connect work, right? Where you can add new data source from the list of configured data sources you have and configure a new destination here and just map it. That's all. Just quickly drag and drop it so that you can view the results and in your destination for testing purposes. So once the testing is done and you know the connection is established as well as the data started flowing into the destination, you can change the routing mechanism to use data routes, which is more matured as well as advanced in a way that it allows a lot of other operations apart from basic filtering and pass-through mechanisms. So you can choose, like I saw in one of the polls, that some of the challenges that you faced in organizations are sending the relevant data to the relevant tool of choice. So here, if you can see, these are the routes that is configured here. You can see a couple of them are active right now for this demo, Palo Alto as well as Windows. So you can see each of those data sources have different data routes within it and is sent to different destinations. So if you can see here, one is just a pass through with Palo Alto data and sent to Splunk TCP here. And the other one is applying Cribl's pack, which we'll get into later, and send to different Splunk machine. And of course, there is another option to send it to Graylog, which is currently disabled right now. So you can also look at it for the Windows, which it's very similarly configured, just a pass-through option as well as packs. Okay. Any questions so far on sources, destinations, or routing mechanisms of Cribl? Anything on the chat, Vikash?
Nothing right now.
Okay. I'll move on then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Guys, if you have any question, you can directly put in the chat box.
All right. So we've already looked at how many data sources Cribl supports and destinations and how the data is forwarded, right? So let's look at two more features of Cribl, right? So one is the pipeline, right? Pipeline is nothing but a data flow that ensures or connects the data source as well as destination. Okay. So pipeline is the data flows, like I mentioned. And inside all these pipelines, there will be multiple functions that are inbuilt into Cribl, right? So to do various activities or actions on the data that is coming in. So let's look at some of the pipelines first. Some of the functions first. Okay. If I try to add into a pipeline, right? So you can list the functions that are available in Cribl. So like you can see, there are three broad categories. One is standard and the formatters option and advanced. So each of these will have different functions built into it. So some of you may already know this if you know Splunk. So you're aware of this feature called eval, where you can apply some eval expressions to do some filtering or do some matching to extract a new field or something like that. It works in a very similar way here. And you can also be aware of, you'll also be aware of lookup function, which you can use to map certain fields and values. And for some of you who have asked whether masking can be done, this is a mask option, which is primarily available to mask and obfuscate sensitive information in the data. And there are regex extraction for field extractions and suppression and sampling. Sampling is an advanced feature which can actually sample your data to reduce volume, right?
Sorry to interrupt you, Meera. Here we have a question from Mr. Vikram Cherala. He's asking, we can send the data to Splunk Enterprise only, or we can also send the data to Splunk Cloud?
So we can send to both, right? So we can send to Splunk Enterprise as well as cloud, depending on your environment type, Vikram. Does that answer your question? Okay, I'll move on then. All right. So if we look at the formatter options, where we have option to serialize it based on a common event format, or if you want to flatten some of the data, you can do that. Serialization is possible. And advanced gives you option to clone the data and apply your own custom JavaScript code into the data pipeline. And also you can have metrics related settings like publish metrics or roll up metrics, and unroll and trim or other advanced options available within the functionals, right? So what do we do with this pipeline? So we apply these pipelines to individual sources and destinations, right? If I go back to one of the pipelines that we have here for the Palo Alto. So here you can see we have a custom eval function that actually assigns a field name as well as a value, right? So it assigns the this value as a field name for index that is sent into Splunk. Okay. I'll just quickly show you how the pipeline is mapped to each of those destinations also. So if you look at Palo Alto data source here, it has a couple of options like I mentioned. So the PA Cribl pack is the one that I showed you right now. So you can see how this pipeline is selected here, right? So for each of those sources and destination, you can choose this pipeline and choose your destination that you want to send the data to. Okay, any questions on this so far? All right, I'll take that as no. So apart from pipelines and functions, Cribl also has a feature called packs. So people from Splunk background will know, will be able to sort of articulate this, right, and compare it with Splunk base. So Cribl packs is nothing but a repository that contains apps with standard functions that are available for some of the standard data sources. Like for example, Palo Alto is one, right? If I look at Palo Alto and the pack that is associated with it, the Cribl experts have already built this out-of-the-box pack that can be used to actually apply to the Palo Alto logs to reduce data, to extract some additional fields, to extract and drop some events or mask some information. So all these are inbuilt available for some of the commonly used data sources. So Cribl pack is that repository that we can use, right? If you're a beginner to Cribl and want to explore this, Cribl packs provide you this option to basically test how your data will look like after it is indexed into Splunk or any other SIEM tools. Okay, so now that we've looked at the pipelines and functions and packs, let's look at what the data looks like when it's sent to Splunk, right? So I have the Splunk instance here. If you look at this screen, it has 4 indexes primarily that is configured for these 2 data sources. So for easier understanding, we've set the index name to actually let you guys aware of what that data is sent into this index, right? So this is the first one is Palo Alto logs with Cribl functions applied on it, and the second one is without Cribl packs applied on that. If you could look at the event count here, okay, you can see almost 50% reduction in the number of events, right? So this is only done through the pack that is available with a little bit of customization, right, to achieve this outcome. So, and the same can be set for Windows also. If you look at the Windows event logs with and without Cribl, you can see the difference in the number of events that is indexed into Splunk. So this is how you take control of what data is sent into your SIEM solutions and what data you can drop or you can choose a low value data and send it to a low cost effective storage like S3 or Azure Blob, etc. Okay, all good. Okay, I'll just quickly wind up the demo just to show you guys about how this masking and hashing is occurring in the Splunk side, right? So if you look at this, this is one of the use case that we have built, and you can look at this field that is actually showing you the masked information, right? And for simplicity purpose, this is indexed into mask index, where you can see the credit card number is actually masked, right? And I'll show you some of the other functions that you can use. For example, hashing. How is it different from masking? If you look at the same field, it's not masked, but it is hashed with a different algorithm, right? But it's not retaining the same format. It's a unique data format, but this value is still not human readable. So the same way, Cribl offers another option to actually encrypt the data. So this works a little bit different than hashing, right? This has an encrypting algorithm built into it where the data is encrypted in a specific format. And like Kumaresh mentioned earlier, Cribl also has a decrypt mechanism to actually make only the users who are supposed to see this data view this information. There is a Cribl app that's available to actually do this. This is a custom command available within that app. You can see how it is decrypted. The information is just with the use of one single command. Okay, that's all I wanted to show you guys as part of this demo. If there are any more questions, I'll take it. Otherwise, I will pass it over to Kumaresh again or Vikas. Yep. Let's stop my issue.
Okay, so thank you for the demo, Viren. And I hope everyone now has seen how easy things are in Cribl, how GUI friendly it is to configure the data sources, destinations, and how quickly you can just define the pipeline so that you can define what transformations need to be applied to which data and send it to which destination. So let's move on to the next session, next bit of the session, which is Q&A. Now, if anyone has any pending questions, feel free to ask them right now. And Miran will be answering the same.
So yes, we have one question from Mr. Tinu. He's asking whether Cribl is a log management solution or not. So we already have replied to his question over the chat. And Cribl is not a log management solution. It's some kind of pipeline which sits between your source and destination. They already been answered. We have one more question, that is SNMP supported in Cribl? Can I pick up SNMP traps? Where would you like to answer this?
Yes, I've responded within the chat. Yes, Cribl can basically use to collect SNMP data also.
Okay. I think this is answered. There's one more question from Priya.
Yes. So what if I don't have a syslog server? Do I need to configure one to use the system? So syslog is not a mandatory setting or a requirement here, right? So if you have a firewall device or a network devices that are sending UDP data, you can directly collect that information into Cribl without the use of syslog. Yeah. Or if you have a syslog setup, Cribl can pick up the data from that also.
We hope this answered your question, Priya. There's one more question from Mr. Dinu.
Mhm.
How difficult it is to set up Cribl in our existing setup?
So it's basically not, that's the whole webinar is about, right? So it's basically to show you guys how easily Cribl can be set up in an existing setup, because you don't have to necessarily change the source side information or destination side information unless it is a custom data source, right? Most of the standard data sources are supported by Cribl out of the box, and Cribl just is sitting in between your sources and destination as an intermediate layer, and it's very easy to set up. As you can see from the demo, it's all GUI based. Don't have to write a lot of configurations to set up Cribl actually.
Here to add, we also, I mean, in Cribl, you can get the pre-education and also a testing environment. There you can play around.
Exactly. Yes. Cribl has a sandbox environment where you can play with these functions and pipelines that I showed you guys a while ago.
We have one more question, I believe, from Vikram Chadella. Is asking, it's required to install any agents to forward the data from Windows Server to Cribl.
So if the Windows servers are already configured to send data to your SIEM solution, right? So it's not necessary for you to install a Cribl agent to collect the data, right? If you have a Splunk universal forwarder, or if you are using any Windows remote data collection mechanism, you can collect the data using that option, obviously in Cribl. But again, you have an option to install Cribl agents also if you want to set up a new if you want to collect data from new Windows machines, you can set up Cribl's data collection agents also on top of that.
Guys, if you have any question, you can please put in the chat box, because this is a Q&A session and we will answer all the questions you have. Also, we are running out, I mean, there's only 8 more minutes to go. To be precise, 7 minutes. I think we have covered all the questions here. Would you like to move on?
Yes. So that is pretty much it. Let me. Oh, there is one more question.
There's one more question.
Yes.
Using universal forward, how can we send to Cribl? Will define Cribl host as outputs.
Exactly. So you just need to replace your indexers or heavy forwarders IP with Cribl's IP. So Cribl natively supports Splunk's S2S protocol. So Splunk UF will see it as just another heavy forwarder or a Splunk enterprise machine. So you just need to update the outputs.conf to reflect the Cribl's IP address instead of Splunk's.
Thank you, Vikram. Now, I think we might also be sharing an email address to the participants so that they can send further questions to us. And I think there is one last poll. So let's jump into it.
So this is a feedback poll regarding the webinar experience. So let me launch it. So we would like you guys to rate us on the scale of 1 to 5 so that we can understand have we answered all your questions, whether it was helpful, how was the demo, those kind of things, and then we can improve on that. So it's just a webinar experience polling scale, you can say. There's one more question in the chat.
Is there any way we can manage this UF configs in Cribl instead of using DS? Unfortunately, not Vikram. Right? So Cribl is not meant to manage the UF configurations, right? So it has to be maintained using the deployment server only, because Cribl can only collect data and send the data to destination. It cannot be managed to send configurations to universal forwarders from like a deployment server.
So yeah, people have given their webinar experience.
Right, that's a good question, Vikram. To manage Cribl agents, we have an option to centrally manage that and send configurations to these Cribl agents, but it's just that you cannot use it to send the configurations to universal forwarders. So for Cribl agent management, you can use a centralized management node.
Yeah, I think we have covered all the questions. So thanks everyone for giving your precious time to us, and we hope that it was a good session for you. That you might have a lot of learning from here. And I would like to add that we will share the recording of this particular webinar in upcoming 2 days, and also this presentation deck which Kumtesh and Miran used for this particular webinar. If you guys have any kind of question which you haven't asked, or after going through the Cribl demo session, after going through this particular webinar, if you have any question, you can write us to the email mentioned here, amelia.fernandez@positka.com, and we will try to answer these questions. Also, you can learn more about the Cribl in our website and also in Cribl's website. So the links are already mentioned here. You don't have to write the links here. We will sharing the presentation deck with you shortly. So yeah, it will cover everything. And also, can you move to? So Cribl do provide the free education and the testing environment. So you can visit the cribl.io/university, where you can learn about more about the Cribl, how it works and what are different products and how things work there. And also you can download a testing environment. There you can get a 1 terabyte of the license free for testing. It's available both in on-prem and on-prem. So, yep. Thanks everyone. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you very much for participating in the webinar, and feel free to send us any questions you may have on the line as well. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for your time. Have a good day.
Thank you.